My name is Jim Roy, and I'm the chair of the Missoula City Club. I'd like to welcome all of you here today. We first would like to thank our sponsors whose generous contributions make it possible to hold City Club forums. Please take a moment as you look at the screen to look at some of the sponsors' names. Second, we'd like to thank the members of our City Club for your support and membership. We're always welcome to anyone to become a member of City Club. You do not have to be a member to attend. We welcome everyone from the community. But if you would like to become a supporting member, please go to our website, cityclubmissoula.com, and sign up, and you can get on our email list and get timely reminders of when our programs are going to be held. We also want to thank Missoula Community Television Access, MCAT, for recording our monthly forums. If you would like to see a replay of today's forum, or if there's forums in the past that you've missed, you can go to the MCAT website and you can watch any of the public forums that we've had in the past. And I'd like to make a special note to welcome some special guests we have here today. We'd like to welcome the students from the United States Institute, or Study of the United States Institute, which is a program through the United States State Department, and it's hosted via the Mansfield Center. And the students here today are from Brazil, Russia, India, and China. This is a highly, highly competitive program that students compete for to attend it. These students are focused on global environmental issues, and they're particularly interested in social and political concerns around the United States. The students have been here for 10 days. They'll be here for another 20 days, and then they're going to go on to San Antonio. Their program directors here today are Pat O'Connor and Shanti Johnson, and if everyone would give a quick round of applause and welcome our guests. If you have not been to City Club Forum in the past, our program is really very simple. The speakers will make their presentation. Afterwards, we will break into what we call table talk. We'll take about 5 or 10 minutes, and each table will sit and talk about the program that was held today. Ask questions of each other, make comments. First of all, introduce each other, because City Club is all about getting to know each other and getting to know the other members of the community and to connect with one another. So talk about the forum, and then what we would like you to do is come up with 1 or 2 questions that you would like to ask the speaker, and then appoint 1 or 2 people to stand up and ask those questions. When you're ready, who's our microphone person today? Abe Abramson in the back will be our microphone person. When we're ready to start, he will go around, raise your hand if you have a question. He will come to you, give you the microphone, and ask the question. We do ask that you ask questions and not make long statements for expediency, and then the program will go there. We'll do a round of tables, and then if we have time, we'll do another round of questions. So, and again, this is your opportunity to meet your fellow people sitting at the table, to get to know each other, and to ask inquisitive questions about the program today. I'd now like to turn it over and introduce Susan Hay Patrick, City Club Board Member and Chief Executive Officer at United Way of Missoula. She will introduce our program today.
Thank you, Jim. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for being here today. Welcome, students. I assume you're going to San Antonio to get cooler after Missoula and those un-air-conditioned dorms that you're all staying in. So very glad to have you here. In addition to being the CEO of United Way, I am the chair and co-founder of Project Tomorrow Montana, which is our community's suicide prevention initiative, formed by business, community, nonprofit, and government leaders to address what is really a public health crisis in our community. Many of you have heard me say that if any other single cause of death was suddenly, tragically, inexplicably claiming the lives of 115 of our family members, friends, colleagues over a 3.5-year period, we would declare it a public health crisis, and we would stop at nothing until we found a cure. And we need to bring, and we are bringing, that same level of passion and determination to the issue of suicide. Before I introduce our panel, I have a short PowerPoint that I'm going to quickly go through. And if any of you want it, because we're not going to dwell on it, but if any of you want copies of the slides, please see me after class. Okay. There we are. So suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. We talk a lot about cancer and heart disease, but suicide is right up there with some of our other most prevalent killers. We know that 90% of those who complete suicide suffer at least one major disorder. Of course, not all people who are mentally ill or depressed become suicidal, but that is a common denominator affecting our population. So 21 million Americans each year suffer from depression. It's not, you know, if we have almost 10% of our population who become depressed at some time in their life, it's not an anomaly. We know that depression and even thoughts of suicide can happen to anyone. I have been depressed, not to the point of feeling suicidal, but to the point of understanding why somebody less resilient and with fewer supports might make the decision to take their own life. In Montana, we have always been in the top 5 for as long as statistics have been recorded. We've been in the top 5 of states for suicide. We are currently, we've been number 1. We're now number 3 with our neighbor Wyoming and the state of Alaska. If you look at the map of where suicide is most prevalent and highest in our country, you'll see they are largely urban states. They're in the West. The yellow states, the highly populous states, have considerably lower, strikingly lower rates of suicide than our rural populations. So in Missoula County, you can see we've had very high rates, 115 if you count the 18 suicides through June of 2017. And if you look at the demographic, you know, we target a lot of our prevention efforts toward children. And we know there is something particularly tragic when a young person takes their own life. But the people who are killing themselves in our community with the most regularity are middle-aged men. This chart shows that we are above the state rate and above the national rate in suicide. And obviously, what we want to do today is shine a light of hope on this issue. There is an awful lot that we can do to prevent suicide. We can learn more about it. We can educate ourselves. We can learn the warning signs of suicide, educate ourselves about prevention programs, and we can restrict means. Those are 3 of the focus areas of Project Tomorrow. As I said, it's a collaboration between our health department, business and community leaders, all of us focused on bringing down the suicide rate and in encouraging people to seek help, normalizing seeking help for depression. We have many resources available. You're going to hear about them in some detail from our panelists. QPR, the most widely taught form of suicide prevention training in the world, Safe Talk, Assist, and there are resource cards on your table that also list local resources. We have a lot going on in our community. The card on your table, the RNG yellow card, includes local suicide prevention resources. We encourage you to take that and have that available. And we can provide more for your workplaces. Again, some of the evidence-based suicide prevention programs we have available in our community for all age groups. SOS for kids, toolkit for senior living communities. The health department distributes hundreds of gun locks, suicide prevention toolkit for rural areas. So I mentioned means restriction. Owning a gun is part of our culture in Montana. We're not telling people not to have guns. We're asking people to to lock up those guns, to keep them safe, especially if someone in the home is depressed or at risk of suicide. One of the reasons means restriction is so important is because of the impulsive nature of suicide. Less than 5 minutes, you can see, between the time someone decides to complete suicide and their attempt. 5 to 19 minutes, 20 minutes to an hour. That's a really short time. And if a gun is unlocked and easily available to you, it makes it all the more likely that you might choose to take your own life. So in addition to means restriction, we need to, as I said, normalize seeking help for depression and mental illness. Our cowboy, rugged individual mentality in Montana does not serve us well in this area. So the message that we are going to impart, and I think that our panel will bear today too, is that depression is treatable, suicide is preventable. We have a wonderful prevention lifeline, also listed on your resource card, and especially appealing to young people, the crisis text line. We've tested these programs. We know that people respond and respond quickly. They are proven effective in reducing suicide and getting people help. So again, our message is that we all have a role to play in preventing suicide, that preventing suicide is everybody's business, and we thank you for being here today and making it your business too. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our outstanding panel. These are people who have spent much of their lives making the world better, and we're really lucky that they're with us here today to talk about suicide and to talk about resilience and hope. And any moment, I'll find their bios. Okay, our moderator is Matt Taylor. Matt, also one of the founders of Project Tomorrow Montana, an organizational consultant, fundraiser, community engagement specialist with a long history of working around the country to create a more just, healthy society where people have meaningful connections to one another and to the world around them. He has delivered services throughout the U.S. in rural and urban areas on the topics of suicide, violence prevention, crisis management, traumatic stress, psychological first aid, resilience, and recovery. He has his own business now, Sea Light Consulting, but prior to that, he served as executive director of Forefront Innovations in Suicide Prevention at the University of Washington. Matt was invited to the White House in 2013 in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook school shootings, and he's testified before congressional task forces and federal agencies as an expert witness. He is trained in numerous best practice suicide prevention programs, some of which I know you'll talk about. And for those of you with the Mansfield Center, he started his career. He worked at the Mansfield Center in 1998. So I know he knows how important those programs are. Sorry. Who's next? Kathy Mangan. Kathy is the executive director of the Learning Center at Red Willow. She has long had an interest in what makes us tick as people and in health. She has her Master's of Science in Health and Physical Education from the University of Montana, and after years working in a variety of arenas, including as a bartender, which I think practically qualifies you to be a psychologist, she realized that her real passion is helping people reach their full potential. And she is a leader in our community in in mind-body healing efforts and in promoting resilience. Kim Seeberger has served as Missoula County's Chief Deputy Treasurer for the last 15 years. After losing her teenage daughter, Tiffany, to suicide in 2008, Kim became a passionate advocate for suicide prevention. Over the last 5 years, she has instructed hundreds, maybe even thousands, of people in QPR, question, persuade, refer, as I said, the most widely taught suicide prevention training in the world, available to all of you if you are so interested in taking it. And last, but certainly not least, we have Anton Johnson. Anton is with the VA. He is the a outreach specialist for the Missoula Vet Center, which is the readjustment counseling services for the Department of Veterans Affairs. He's an Army veteran who served in Afghanistan in 2004, 2005 as a combat engineer. He has his bachelor's in social work. He also works with Extreme Sports for Vets, which helps veterans heal through extreme sports. Lifetime member and 2016-17 All-American Commander of VFW, Missoula VFW Post 209, and also on the leadership group for Project Tomorrow Montana. I also want to introduce two people who are with us today from Project Tomorrow Montana, Betty and Mike. Please raise your... Betty is a nurse. Mike is a former administrator with DPHHS. Betty's our volunteer coordinator at Project Tomorrow Montana at United Way. Mike is designing all of our protocols and everything else. They are tremendous resources, both survivors, tremendous resources. And please, if you're interested in getting more involved in this issue, please introduce yourselves to Betty and Mike. So now, having talked too much, I'm going to turn it over to our panel and Matt.
Thanks very much, Susan. And I think on behalf of the panel and so many in Missoula and Western Montana, I just want to acknowledge Susan's leadership on this issue and the fact that United Way, as well as the City of Missoula County Public Health Department, looked at some of the statistics and heard stories, personal stories from individuals, from survivors, back in 2014 and decided we're going to take a new approach to how suicide is talked about in this community. And it was largely through Susan's leadership as well as the former City County Public Health Department Suicide Prevention Coordinator, Christy Scheel, and now the new coordinator, Heidi Kendall, that these sort of activities have sort of resurfaced as a major initiative in our county, with one of the goals of being how to better coordinate services among so many different organizations. Right, and Heidi's out of town today, otherwise you'd be hearing from her too. So thank you, Susan. Yep. So I have a few slides here very quickly that are going to put this conversation, this issue, in both a national context and then bring it down at a very personal level. And because adults learn much the same way young children learn, there will be repetitive information to what Susan has given. And it's by design, because we realize this is a topic that is new to some of you and frankly is probably a little bit uncomfortable to all of us. The reality of it is that suicide is a public health issue, crisis if you will, that connects all of us. All of us in this room have been touched in some way or another by the issue of suicide. Whether we're willing to talk publicly about it right now or not, most of us know somebody who has died by suicide. We've been part of a community group, maybe a small subset of individuals who have experienced a loss within that group. Or at a minimum, we know somebody who has attempted, or quite likely in a room this size, there are multiple people who have attempted. And I say that so upfront because this really is an issue that it ripples throughout all aspects of society. And yet we're only just now starting to become a little bit more comfortable talking about it. And so my personal mission is to help break open those doors, because in some ways it's this dirty little secret that many of us have in our minds or in our history or in our family tree, and yet it has a profound connection to one another. So let's get it out there more in the open and find out ways to safely, more comfortably, and more proactively talk about this issue. I believe that in 20 years from now, we will be talking about suicide in much the same way we talk about HIV, or way back when nobody wanted to use their seatbelts, and then public safety campaigns and some legislation, obviously, helped push that topic forward, and now almost all people do. So I think we're at an exciting sort of evolution in the suicide prevention field. Okay, so where does this topic fit in as far as more of an organizational structure? I know there are many leaders here in this room, so we'd like to let you know that within the state of Montana, there are a number of main priorities, and one is raising public awareness about the issue of suicide. Second is implementing best practice strategies or programs that we know work. And specifically, we want to create strategies for both suicide prevention Intervention, meaning helping somebody when they're actually in crisis. Postvention, which would be supporting individuals after an attempt or after a suicide, and improving coordination across agencies. So where does this fit in on a national perspective? There is a national strategy for suicide prevention. Project Tomorrow is particularly interested in this priority right here, which is about changing the conversation about suicide. Okay, and I'll speak more about that in just a moment. So, a quick visual of what a comprehensive approach to suicide prevention might look like in a community. First of all, it involves public education, which helps broader groups of individuals begin to better identify those that might be at risk for suicide and assist them when they're in a crisis. One of the things that's happening in the suicide prevention field is we're starting to move away from this focus on what are the risk factors. Oh, this person, you know, they had this loss and they're part of this group and they act this way, that means they're high risk for suicide. Some of that is useful information to know, but the reality of it is almost every single one of us in this room could be at risk for suicide given the sort of right combination of stressors and a vulnerable point in our life when we don't have maybe the best coping skills. So by focusing too much on the people that we always think are the highest risk, we tend to miss all the cues that other people who are very successful, who are very wealthy, who seem to be very popular, those warning signs that those individuals are giving out, because we just tend to think of what are the highest risk factors. So in other words, the goal of this is to help us truly understand that every single one of us could be at risk. And when we see certain kinds of behaviors, we should be willing to step up and ask somebody, are you thinking about suicide? Because here's a takeaway message for you. Despite what your gut may tell you or what somebody else may have told you in the past, asking somebody directly about suicide does not increase their risk. It does not increase their risk. It actually lowers their risk. And as some of the other panelists might share later, if somebody shares with you that they've been thinking about suicide, that's good news. Our reaction sometimes can be to kind of panic and go, oh my God, what do I do now? But by them just sharing that information, they've dramatically lowered their risk. We want people to be able to better respond in crisis, so a comprehensive approach looks like better training for EMTs, for 911 dispatch, for law enforcement. It involves focusing on supporting those who've lost someone to suicide. Kim is going to talk about that. As Susan mentioned, it does require a public focus on reducing access to lethal means, and I'll reinforce that in just a minute. A comprehensive approach looks like life skills education in the schools and in the community, programs such as Red Willow that Kathy is going to describe in more detail in a moment. It looks like programs that improve people's connectiveness to one another, such as Anton's program with vets. Suicide is often the language of isolation and loneliness. And if there's one thing that almost all people who attempt or die by suicide have in common, it's that they feel very isolated in their pain, whether that pain is emotional or physical. So programs that improve connectedness is key. Another part of a comprehensive approach looks like having better care transitions. So when a high school student is taken for a suicide risk assessment, there's better information sharing. When you go to the emergency department with a son or daughter who has attempted, there's better care coordination back to a psychologist. Or when somebody who is discharged from a hospital after an attempt, there's better communication to the family group, maybe even to the workplace if that's appropriate, as well as to mental health care. So a comprehensive approach looks like many different factors. I mentioned a positive narrative because this is what Project Tomorrow is trying to focus on. Historically, there's been an over-focus on the statistics and how dark and depressing and catastrophic all the suicide rates are. That kind of negative messaging has a place in terms of alerting the public to a crisis, but for those who are in a deep, dark place of depression, sometimes that message can say to you, there's no hope. And so we want to focus on, and everything that Project Tomorrow does, and everything I think the state of Montana and the city of Missoula does, we want to focus on these kind of messages, that there are actions you can take to prevent suicide, that prevention actually works, that resiliency and recovery through depression after a loss is not only possible, but it's actually the norm, that effective programs do exist and that help is available. We can talk a lot about the number of people who die by suicide each year. There are estimates that for every one person who dies by suicide, there are at least 25 attempts. I don't mean that one person has attempted 25 times, but I mean that in society in general. So in the US, that might look like just over 1 million people attempting per year. That's both shocking but hopeful to me, because it means that people who attempt are often not choosing the most lethal means that would cause them to die. And it does mean to me that there are so many opportunities for intervention and for us to reach out and help. 90% of people who attempt suicide do not go on to die by suicide. That's where we say resilience and recovery is actually the norm. So here's what kind of an old school message would look like. Dark, scary, sort of shock messages, full day event, suicide prevention. Why can't we find any answers? And it's understandable that historically we've kind of had that message, right? Because it is a public health crisis. Not to sugarcoat it, but this kind of group of messaging here is more hopeful and future looking. That's why our initiative is called what? Project Tomorrow. And you see most of our public messaging involves people looking forward and talking about connecting and getting through things. So what does safe messaging for an initiative like this look like? Well, first of all, and this I suppose is applicable, some of this is applicable no matter what topic we're talking about. You need to know who we're trying to message, or why are we messaging this information, who do we want to reach, and what do we want them to do or know as a result of our messaging. So we've mentioned a little bit about here. We want to have a positive narrative, and just to reinforce what that means, there are actions you can take to reduce suicide. Prevention works. Resilience and recovery is the norm. Effective services exist in our community. Most people don't go on to die by suicide. Help is available. What do we want to avoid? In other words, how do we keep our public messaging safe about this topic? We want to avoid portraying suicide as common. We want to avoid unnecessarily reinforcing notions of hopelessness, that this subject is intractable, that we're not making any headway. We also don't want to talk about suicide in a way that provides details about the way somebody did it. Robin Williams was a really good example in the public. Obviously, many of us were really taken aback by that suicide, but it became really dangerous when some of the public stories, the news stories about it, were describing exactly how he looked when he was found or what happened. And why is this so dangerous? Because when people are in a very, very dark place and feeling very vulnerable, sometimes knowing the details of a suicide sort of puts a roadmap in their mind, and it shows them how they might do it. So we want to kind of avoid any specific details about a suicide act. We don't want to glamorize it, and we don't want to provide too much information about the personality or lifestyle of somebody who died by suicide, lest somebody very vulnerable could over-identify with it. Just a couple more slides here. Susan talked about means restriction. We've been talking so much in the suicide prevention field and in society about why? Why are so many people dying by suicide? Why did he do it? Why did she do it? What the suicide prevention field wants is for the community to increasingly focus on how, meaning like what were the means, and what can we do to educate society about those means. So Susan put up a little graph before that I think is very, very important. And so I want to reinforce it here. For most people who have suicidal thoughts, those thoughts may come and go throughout multiple points in their life. Or maybe there's a particularly acute time when for a month it seems very, very center in their mind. But the time from when a person actually says, I'm going to do it now, to the time when they actually complete. Look at this. For about 70% of the people, it's within an hour. For about 48% of the people, it's less than 20 minutes, and for about 24% of the people, it's less than 5 minutes. Meaning that suicide is often a very, very impulsive act. So if we can educate the public about how, drugs and alcohol increase impulsivity, and in times of crisis, we really need to try and get those things out of the house if possible. And as Susan mentioned, means restriction is not anti-gun. I mean, there's two ways to lose public office or never even get to public office in Montana. One is guns and the other is guns. No, it's about safe storage, and it's about if you're a gun owner and you're a responsible gun owner and you are experiencing a really dark, depressing period of your life, or your son or daughter is there a way we can temporarily remove the guns from the house? It's about how many prescription medications do you have in your medicine cabinet? It's about, are you hearing that your friend is maybe building up a supply? And what can you do to help remove those things from the situation? So what are some guiding principles for a comprehensive suicide prevention initiative? We want to engage with people who have been there, people who have experienced loss, who have experienced suicidal ideation, people with what we call lived experience, because it's you, it's me, it's our neighbors. And the more we can have public awareness campaigns that have people on there that we can relate to, maybe somebody we know, somebody who is hunting in that particular field below that mountain that we can all see from Missoula, these things help. So engaging people with lived experience is really important. Building better partnerships and collaboration across agencies, which is something Project Tomorrow is trying to do. Improving the way we talk about suicide in the media. Having approaches that are culturally appropriate. I mean, we can easily think, okay, well, that must be, he's talking about with American Indian, Alaska Native, or gay, bisexual, transgender individuals. I'm also talking about sportsmen. I'm also talking about the culture of people who are elderly. Like, messaging should look different for that group, right? So that's what it looks like. And finally, making sure that we are always providing trainings, as well as clinical programs, assessment programs, et cetera, that are evidence-based. This is a very, very quick overview of some key concepts, but we're going to have time for question and answers a little bit later. For now, though, I want to make sure that we have time for our panel to share some of their insights. And I've asked them while they're providing their comments, they would address one specific question each. So we'll start with Anton. And as Anton's speaking, I'd like to ask him, with all of the efforts that are underway within the many branches of military service to address suicide, what are some, maybe even just one, key concept that this group should know, or that the Missoula community can learn from those efforts that we can perhaps implement here? So Anton, we'll start with you.
Thank you, everybody. Although I've been a part of many organizations and many groups to help in this matter, I am by no means an expert at it, so bear with me. So the military branches throughout have always had a kind of, I want to call it a death by PowerPoint way of training individuals. And so if any of you have served, especially in the past years with technology advancements, you've probably had to sit through long briefings before you go on leave or take time away, that they just kill you with PowerPoints. We know that that's not always the best method of training. So recently the military branches have taken on and teamed up with different best practices, whether it's with Living Works or doing Safe Talk trainings, QPRs, and they're trying to educate each other on identifying, because we know that having, or in the past having ideas of suicide or mental illness has been stigmatizing. Military members definitely are not immune to this. Asking for help is not the easiest thing for anyone to do, especially while you're in the service, because you're taught to suck it up and drive on. You're taught to, just be there, do your job, and go for it. And so asking for mental health help definitely was one of those things that have been in the past stigmatized or frowned upon. The military has tried recently to really destigmatize that by campaigns, posters, better training for the military men and women to be able to identify not only in themselves but in each other. A big thing that we're pushing with Project Tomorrow is the training one another in the community so we can identify someone near us, whether it's a coworker, a family member, a loved one, that they may be experiencing issues, that we can help ask that question. Because like Matt stated, if you ask that question, you're going to decrease the likelihood that it might happen, as well as open up the opportunity for that person to reach out for help. And that's a big part of the problem. Is in the past we've always said, well, don't ask because you're going to put that idea in their head. And in reality, we want you to ask that question, as uncomfortable as it may be. The military is working hard at doing it within their branches, but the military is just a big cross-section of the general population. So men and women join the military in all walks of life, so you're going to experience the same issues that you would in the community, especially when they get out. They're returning back to a community after doing many courageous things. They signed up with their life to make sure that they could protect America's freedoms and the ideas of America. And so when they return home, sometimes that reintegration back to community can be difficult, whether they got out because of just time served, they got out because of injuries, or because of medical discharges. And so they're returning back to a community where they may not feel like they fit in right away. It's not impossible for them to reintegrate smoothly. There's a lot of support structures, community events, different things that can really help them do that. But a lot of times, reaching out for military members can be difficult outside of what they feel the comfort zone is. Some of the things that we try to do to capture those veterans coming back is outreaching to them with different methods. So my office where I work at the Vet Center, you may have seen a big white mobile vet center. It's a big white RV. It's got plastered on the side, big kind of moving billboard. And the whole idea with that is to get out into rural areas. A lot of times veterans will return home and maybe want to get away from the community, start their farm, or get up into the hills and enjoy the beautiful views, get into nature. And so sometimes they may not be near services. So we take our services to them. We cover all of western Montana with that, and try to reach out and get into those smaller communities where they may not have services, and let them know where they can access those services. Another thing with the nonprofit side, as they spoke, the extreme sports for veterans, we recognized that veterans were coming home and not accessing some of those services, even though they were available. Once again, kind of goes back to maybe that stigma of walking into a mental health facility or asking for help. We wanted to make sure that we broke down those barriers and made it very easy for them to reach out to one another or to somebody who's in a position to assist them to get into help. So we started Extreme Sports for Veterans 7 years ago as a pilot program after the loss of one of our board members. She lost her stepbrother to suicide when he returned home from Iraq. She wanted to find a way to connect with these veterans as they returned home and have them connect with one another, as well as connect into the services in the community. So we felt that providing free opportunities to get veterans into extreme sports was a really good way to lure them into some support. They get to go out, have a fun time, really enjoy the camaraderie that maybe they're missing once they leave the service. And the men and women who participate also get to connect with one another, but find out about services that may be available by talking with each other, finding best practices, what works, what doesn't, as well as some of the leaders in the group can really guide them down the path of finding the right support. So that's a really important aspect of it, because if we can connect individuals, break that isolation, which Matt spoke on as a big key factor of suicide, if we can break that isolation, get them engaged with one another, find that support or that community, we have a better chances of preventing suicide amongst the veteran community at home. We've provided multiple trainings, and we're planning on doing more. for suicide prevention within the veteran community, as well as we're expanding to families of veterans, and even looking at alternatives like bartenders, because bartenders a lot of times may be the front line for talking with a veteran who's in crisis. Drugs and alcohol can definitely add to those risk factors, and if you're talking to a bartender that maybe understands how to identify some of those conversations that may be alluding to the fact that a veteran may be thinking about suicide, we want to make sure that they're educated on how to get that veteran into care. So that's one of the steps that we're looking forward to try to think alternatively of connecting veterans back to supports already available in the community. So kind of one over, there is plenty of veteran services out there. Some of the main ones are listed for the crisis numbers on the yellow and white cards, or orange and white cards there. And it's important to use best practices. So although there may be many services out there, some of the key ones that are listed there are known to be great. The crisis line, or press 1 for help, is an amazing opportunity to get a veteran a number that he could or she could call that's going to connect them with people who are trained specifically for that, and have the availability to link those veterans up with local resources, or talk to them on the phone until they can get them stabilized to get them the help that they need. And although that's not local, when you call that number, it connects you to somebody who can reconnect you with someone local. They answer the phone 24/7, so it's a lot better than just walking into a facility that may or may not be able to see you, because they can address some of the crisis right at the moment it's happening. Since we know it happens within minutes to hours, it's really crucial to get them connected with somebody right then. And also, when you find out that that person may be thinking of suicide, it can be scary. So we want to make sure that we're linking them with somebody who has the professional knowledge that can link them and get them the support they need. So, all right, thank you, everybody. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to ask.
Thanks, Anton. So we're going to transition here to Kim Seeberger, and I've asked Kim, as somebody who is a survivor of suicide loss, to, within her comments, to incorporate an answer to this kind of question, which is, if somebody in this audience has a coworker or a friend who has recently experienced a suicide loss, what would you like them to know about what that survivor may need, as far as, how we can talk to them and support them?
Thank you. As Matt said, my name is Kim Seeberger. I am a QPR instructor. I've been teaching it for 5 years now. In 2008, we lost our 17-year-old daughter, Tiffany, to suicide. I can't explain to you the impact that has and had and will always have on our family. It's not something that goes away and heals. Hopefully you learn some coping skills in order to deal with it. My goal with the QPR, the question, persuade, and refer, is to educate the community. Let them know the problem that is out there with suicide. Many people don't know how serious this situation is. When somebody completes suicide, it's not normally in the paper indicating that that's occurred. Unless you happen to know that person, know the family, have some connection, you don't know that these suicides are happening out there. And so my goal with the other instructors are to get this education out there, to let people know what the warning signs and clues are, what to watch for. Let people who are in a crisis or are feeling suicidal know that they don't have to do this alone. There is help out there. During the past year, the instructors, there's 6 of us, I think, in Missoula right now. We just got through training 4 more instructors. We have trained approximately 2,000 people in QPR. This last year, we hit all of the schools in School District 1 for the grade school, middle schools, and high schools. We've offered numerous classes through Providence Health. We've gone to churches. We have done the nursing students at the university. The largest group that Heidi and I did this spring was we got an invitation to do it for the fraternity and sorority at the university. And it happened to be in the UC ballroom, and there were over 300 people attending that. And what I was amazed on with that whole group is I was sort of expecting the phones or the tablets to be out and people paying more attention to that than what we were talking about. And I didn't see one person doing that during the whole thing. And we've also done a number of other businesses and organizations. This Thursday, I was invited to attend the Law Force Academy in Helena, and I will be doing the QPR presentation to about 34 cadets and 10 of their instructors. So the doors are really opening up. When my daughter died 9 years ago and I tried to do something, the doors were shut on me so fast I couldn't even fathom it. The last 3 years, I've seen amazing progress with people willing to talk about it and to get the information out there to the community. If you are interested in having a QPR presentation at your work or an organization that you belong to, if you want to contact Project Tomorrow or Heidi Kindle at the health department, they will make arrangements. We do it during the day, we'll do it in the evenings, on the weekends. We've got enough instructors that we're pretty much open to doing it at any time. We do like to have an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's the best, because then we can get a lot of interaction, questions and answers with the audience, but we have done it up to an hour. So please let us know if you are interested. As far as the question that I'm supposed to answer with being a suicide loss survivor and what advice I would give, when my daughter died, I probably did not return to work for a good month and a half. I just couldn't do it. When I did return to work at Missoula County, they had brought in a counselor to talk with all of my employees about how I might be feeling, what kind of reactions, things to look for. And I so appreciated that because the group was understanding. And knew that, hey, I'm probably not going to be the same person I was before, and it's going to take me time to get settled back in. Everybody handles the situations differently. I grieve differently than my husband grieved, than my son grieved, than the rest of the family. So the things that I'm going to mention here, don't necessarily apply to everyone, but these are some of the things that I found that were helpful or sometimes cause a little anxiety on top of it. But don't be afraid to approach people. Sometimes I felt that people were afraid to come up to me because it's not like they can come up to you and go, oh, how are you doing? They know you're going through a horrific time and they don't know what to say to you, so they sometimes avoid you, and you get that feeling. You may not ask them how they're doing, but you could ask if there's anything that you could do to help them, to support them. Accept that tears may come. That's just part of life anymore. You may cause them to cry, but that's okay. That's all part of the grieving. Understand that it may be difficult for them to focus. That was one thing that they really stressed with my group at work. Things that, questions when they would come up to me before that I could answer right off the bat, even the simplest things. Some days I would say to them, I can't answer that. Can you go to somebody else and get the answer? It's just very difficult. So don't expect them to be on top of their game right away. Be careful not to show judgment or to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. Just for example, as I said, I was out for a good month and a half, and I would have people ask me, are you back to work yet? And I would say no. And then their response would be, geez, you should really get back to work. And then when I finally did go back to work, and I would have people say, are you back to work yet? And I'd say, yes, I am. oh, really? And I felt like it was a no-win situation. And I know I learned so much forgiveness through this whole thing. I know it wasn't because they were trying to be bossy or interfere or anything, but it was just their way of trying to show concern. Understand that grieving doesn't end in a month, 6 months, or even a year. It goes on and on. The firsts are horrible. Be aware of them. The first birthday, the first holiday, the first anniversary date. My daughter died in February, and the first Christmas, I debated, do I put the tree up or don't I put the tree up? I mean, my son still lived at home, and I knew that if I didn't put that tree up, I was never going to have another Christmas tree in my life. And so I did it. Check in with them. Just, whether you check in with them in person, give them a call, drop them a card. I remember getting some cards 8 months past a year down the road, and it was just thinking of you cards. And oh my God, that meant so much to me. That, everybody else's life goes on pretty much as normal, where our life was still shattered. And just having those cards meant the world to me. If appropriate, don't avoid using the person's name who died. I had sometimes my fear was that people would forget my daughter even existed. And so that's something my family does. If something brings us to a remembrance, we say her name and go, remember this. I had a friend who, it was after a year of her death, happened to be walking past our house, and he saw me outside, and he stopped and he said, geez, Kim, I never did get an opportunity to say how sorry I was about Tiffany's death. And it was like the floodwaters broke. And his eyes got huge, and he goes, oh my God, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. And I said, I so appreciate you talking and saying this. This is okay. This is just me now. I can cry at the drop of a hat. So it meant a lot that, he showed his concern still, even after that time. And then offering assistance or support when they have things that need to be completed. Amazingly, Tiffany's friends immediately said, can we do the slideshow at the funeral? We let them do that. We were so overwhelmed and still in shock and all of that. Offering to do things like that is so helpful. We had, others take other parts of the service and help out there. There are other things, depending on the person that passes, that has to be done. I have 2 sisters that are like lionesses when it came to me and the things that we had to handle afterwards, such as with her cell phone. It took me 3 months before I could get that shut off. I couldn't do it right away. And when I did, the response from the person was, well, that's fine, but you have to pay the $300 shut-off fee because you haven't been in the contract for 2 months. And I couldn't handle it. My sister took over and handled it. So where you can help out, that would be fabulous. So I think my time is up. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kim. And quickly, because I know we're behind schedule here, we'll transition to Kathy Mangan, and I've asked Kathy to incorporate this answer, which is if we find ourselves in a situation where somebody shares with us that they've been thinking about suicide, how can we be better in touch with our own reactions, maybe the way our body's reacting or the way our emotions are triggered? Kathy?
Thanks, Matt. So it's all about resiliency at the Learning Center at Red Willow. It's all about resiliency. So the idea is for us to build a sense of resiliency for whatever might be coming down the path towards us, because we don't have a way of knowing in advance the things that are going to happen in our lives. And things happen, right? It's life. So what I'm going to do, rather than talk about resiliency, is we're going to do some. What do you think? Huh? You've been sitting here long enough? Yeah, I thought so. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I'm going to stand up because I'm tired of sitting. But what I would like everybody in the room to do is to put both your feet on the floor if they're not. No crossed legs, okay? I want you to sit up tall. I want you to sit up tall. I want you to feel your sits bones on your chair. If you're standing up, I want you to feel your feet under you. I want you to imagine that you have, I'm going to use Matt's head because it's right here. I want you to imagine that you have kind of a high ponytail, okay? And that there is a rope or a thread or a chain or something that's lifting up. So you're solid on the ground. You're solid on the ground, both your sits bones and your feet. And you're being pulled up very gently so that your back feels long, your neck feels long. You notice in this position that your shoulder blades drop into their natural position on your spine. You're not crunched up, not hunched forward. Your shoulders come out of your ears, okay? And then what I want you to do is you're welcome to leave your eyes open if you would like, or you may close them if that's comfortable for you. If you do choose to leave your eyes open, my suggestion is, because I don't want all of you guys staring at me while we're doing this, is to just drop your gaze. So just lower your eyes and look at a place about 4 or 5 feet in front of you, okay? But you leave your head in its neutral, natural, and comfortable position. All right, so let's just tap in to how we're feeling right now and notice where there might be some tightness or stress in your body. Just identify where that is. Might be in your shoulders. You might feel tightening around your heart. Might be in your back. Might be in your hips. Might have a little bit of a headache. I don't know what that is for you. Just notice it. And then go ahead and take in a nice deep breath. Nice deep breath. And then just go ahead and let that breath out. Nice deep breath in and a nice deep breath out. And we're going to focus just on the breath for just a couple of minutes. Just a couple of minutes. In and out. You might notice that if you're breathing in through your nose, you might notice that you can feel the air moving in and out at your nostrils. You might also notice that your chest is rising and falling with the breath. You might also notice that your belly is coming up and down as well. Out and in, as you inhale and as you exhale. It's normal, even when we're trying to focus on our breath, for our mind to have thoughts. That's what minds do. They have thoughts. So every time a thought shows up, don't judge yourself about it. Just simply say, having a thought. You might have an image of clouds passing on a really sunny day. And you might just hook that thought to a cloud and watch it leave your sky. Or if you're a water baby, you might really like to imagine a river flowing by, and there might be some leaves in the river, and you can attach the thought to a leaf and just let it go. It'll come back. You don't need to worry about that. So go ahead and spend another minute or two just breathing in and out, feeling yourself inhabiting your body, noticing how you're doing. Just notice how you're doing. With no judgment, with no correction necessary, just being where you are right now, right here. And then as you're ready, you can begin to bring your attention back to the room. You can move your hands and feet a little bit. Start to move around in your chair. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So the idea of this little exercise is an example of the things that we have available to us as human beings. All of us have breath, right? All of us have the capacity to tap into that very core sense of ourselves and get ourselves grounded and get ourselves present. Okay. These are the kinds of things that are really simple for us to do, and that if we practice them regularly, like every day, at least once, maybe even twice, then what we find is that when we need them, when we are under more stress than usual, we have the capacity, because we have trained our brains, right? We've trained our brains to be able to access the ability to bring ourselves into a place of centeredness and groundedness, so that we have the capacity to tap into our wisdom and our ability to not only help ourselves, but to help those people around us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Thanks to the panelists and to Susan and for all of you for being present during this difficult topic. I know we're going to have time later to answer some questions if you so are inclined, but for right now we're transitioning to announcements. Is that correct? A break. Okay. Okay.
So our deal is we're done by 1 o'clock. That's part of our deal. So we're going to have a lightning round of questions today. And who's ready with a question? All right, back here.
So which one should I ask? We were talking about the fact that the earlier you introduce these ideas, like with my own children, I'm a nurse, my husband's a physician. I talk to my kids on a regular basis and said, there probably will come a time in your life when you might think about ending your life. And let's talk about that. And if you can't come to me, then let's talk about some of the people that you can go to. And I think one of the groups that you all did not mention were
Question.
pediatricians. Exactly, thank you. I think the medical profession would be the perfect entree to talking to people about this. Do you feel safe in your home? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? And pediatricians talking to parents, what do you think?
Really quickly, I'd say we would all agree with you wholeheartedly. And the slide that was up there that talked about what a comprehensive approach to suicide prevention looks like included a mention about improving care transitions. And so part of the goal, long-term goal of Project Tomorrow, is to increase the number of primary care providers and pediatricians who are sort of ready, willing, and able, so to speak, to talk openly about depression and suicide. And there is movement in that direction, but I think it's a critical, absolutely critical component. And about talking to kids early, the more we can normalize the notion of help seeking, and the more we can normalize this notion that some of us experience emotional crises in our lives, and the key is being connected and reaching out, then the better.
Okay, my question is our question is pretty simple, I hope. This project tomorrow is amazing. It's great work you're doing, but what are your funding situations now? Are you sustainable? Do you have multi-year commitments? And is the money coming from public and private? And all in one is we're interested to know if you have a horizon ahead of you of solid funding, or are you going to be after it again?
That's a great question, and I would say we're very open to continuing that discussion. We do have a 3-year plan, like what our strategic plan is for 3 years, and central in that is increasing a funding base for it. So right now, we're operating a lot on in-kind sponsorships. and a lot of in-kind support, specifically from United Way of Missoula County. We have had some private donations. I think it was it U.S. Bank or First Wells Fargo contributed. But we are in a position where we do need to seek and receive funding to expand training, to expand the public messaging work that we're doing, and to increase the infrastructure behind the initiative, because right now it's all volunteer, essentially.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Renu Yadav from India, and our table has agreed upon a question. Now, my question is, how effective can religion and spirituality be in preventing suicides or reducing the current rate of suicides, or can religion actually be counterproductive and maybe have the opposite impact? Instead of preventing suicides, it may actually increase suicides, because nowadays we have all this like Islamic State and other terrorist organizations. They are using religion as a tool to promote terrorism, and that is why we have these lone wolf attack and suicide bombers who don't care about their lives and don't care about their families at all. So how can we use religion and spirituality to prevent suicides, and so that the other extreme version, which actually promotes suicides and suicide bombers, can be decreased?
I think that's a courageous and a very important and timely question, so thank you for it. Religion and spirituality, as we all know, can be used for good and it can be used for evil. We do know that having a connection to a faith tradition, a spiritual community, for the vast majority of people, is what we call a protective factor. In other words, it helps protect us from feeling isolated and from feeling not connected to one another. So it helps keep us safer. But religion can be used for very evil purposes, and it has throughout history. Almost all religions have had very, very dark, shameful episodes of its history. So I think in this capacity, when we do see organizations, organized religions, organized groups of any kind promoting suicide as an ends to achieving some goal, I think it's very important for us to focus on if the goal is about creating a just society, or if the goal is about moving forward a political agenda, there are far more appropriate ways to do that, as far as building safety in a community, focusing on the core belief systems behind it, and not focusing on hate and on self-harm as a way to achieve an end.
We have a question from our table. We noticed in your slide presentation that Montana ranks in the first 2 or 3 in completed suicides. We also have an observation that we also rank probably in the top 2 or 3 in terms of alcohol consumption. What are your thoughts about the connection between completed suicides and those who are under the influence at the time of suicide?
The connection between suicide and alcohol or drug usage is extremely high. It's the most correlated aspect. So the fact that Montana has some of the highest binge drinking rates in the country and the highest suicide rates are, I think, no surprise. The combination is clear. But there are many other factors, of course, that go into taking one's life. The prevalence of drugs and alcohol increases impulsivity, and we need to try and do a better job of educating the public about that link and trying to remove those dangerous contributing factors when somebody is in crisis.
How can resources meant to mitigate suicide, whether it's families or teachers or physicians, mental health professionals, address depictions of suicide in popular media that might seem to glamorize or even encourage suicidal behavior? I'm thinking especially of this recent show, 13 Reasons Why.
My comment is that something like 13 Reasons Why is a perfect opportunity to open up a dialogue with students and with your children about suicide. Because if you're ever uncomfortable with bringing up this topic before, here's somebody, a director, a media service that has brought it right into your living room. And if you're not familiar with the show 13 Reasons Why and you have children, I would encourage you to inform yourself about it, because it's one of the top streamed shows on Netflix, and almost all kids know about it, whether they're talking to their parents or not. So I think it's incumbent on us as teachers and as parents to have an open conversation about it. And in the case of 13 Reasons Why, possibly watching it with your son or daughter and talking about how they feel about what they're seeing. I do think that the show was done in some very irresponsible ways, personally. And the directors themselves were kind of very resistant to hearing the feedback of suicide prevention experts. And it's only recently that they've been making some modifications, not of the show, but of including some public education information about it. But I think it's a perfect opportunity to open up the dialogue.
It is 1 o'clock, so nobody has to apologize for standing up and leaving, but obviously a lot of people aren't going to leave. So we'll take a couple more questions for those of you that don't have to exit right now.
I was puzzled by one thing. At one point, you said that you wanted to avoid or wish that we did not publicize the details of suicides. And on another slide, you said you wanted the public to focus on how. That seems contradictory to me.
We're talking about understanding, okay, I understand the point. We don't want people to describe in detail, or media to describe in detail, the way somebody went about it. So this is particularly true when we talk about people who die by hanging or suffocation. And we want a better focus of research and public dollars and public training. This is where the how came up, about means restriction. Does that make sense? And as far as the comment about 13 Reasons Why, there are guidelines online. You can look at the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. There are very clear guidelines about how the media should report about suicide.
Are there other questions? If not, thank you all very much. Sorry we ran over a little bit.
Thank you.